The desperate signal. The crystal spires of Kythera Prime gleamed beneath twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the endless azure oceans that covered 90% of the planet. For 3 million years, the Kythera had lived in harmony with their world, their graceful forms gliding through underwater cities built from living coral. They were artists, philosophers, and healers. They had never known war. That was before the Syndicate found them. Elder Zarath floated in the sacred chamber of voices, her translucent fins trembling as another explosion shook the ocean floor above. The harvester ships had been working for 7 rotations now, their massive extraction beams turning entire seas into vapor. What had once been the western spiral ocean was now a crater of cracked mud, littered with the shells of dying sea life. Her people were gathering around her, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with fear and confusion. The younger ones pulsed rapid questions in the ancient light speech, while the elders maintained the steady glow of those who had accepted death. But Zarath had not accepted anything. In her webbed hands, she held a device that might save them all, or damn them forever. The quantum transmitter was barely the size of her palm, its alien technology salvaged from a crashed exploration vessel decades ago. Her people had studied it in secret, learning its function but never daring to use it. Until now. Elder, whispered her aide, the young Kythera's voice carrying through the water with barely controlled panic. The council ships, they flee. Even the mighty Altarians abandon us. Zarath had watched the exodus through the observation portals, ships of every shape and size lifting away from Kythera's surface, their crews unwilling to face the Syndicate's might. The Galactic Council had sent a formal response to their pleas for help. The situation is under review. Evacuation assistance will be provided to any Kythera willing to relocate to designated refugee worlds. Relocation, as if her people could exist anywhere but in the living oceans of their birth world. As if 3 million years of evolution could be abandoned like an old shell. She activated the transmitter. The device hummed to life, its crystals glowing with stored energy. Zarath had programmed it with coordinates that made her people gasp in horror when she announced her intention. Not to the Council, not to their supposed allies, to a small blue world in the outer spiral, 3rd planet from a yellow star. To Earth. Elder, no, breathed the Keeper of Histories, an ancient Kythera, whose patterns had faded to barely visible glimmers. The records, the warnings, they are a predator species, born killers. The Council forbids all contact. The Council forbids, Zarath replied, her own patterns flashing with desperate determination. But the Council abandons. If we must call upon monsters to save us from monsters, then so be it. She began the transmission. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply manifests when the alert came through. The bridge of the UES Defiance hummed with quiet efficiency, her crew of 200 going about their duties with the practiced calm of career spacers. They were 3 days out from Mars, running a routine patrol of the Sol system's outer boundaries, when every communication array on the ship suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, his voice tight with confusion. "We're receiving a transmission on a quantum frequency. Sources." He paused, checking his readings twice. "Source is beyond the galactic edge, ma'am. Outside Council space." Chen was out of her command chair before he finished speaking. At 42, she carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had earned command through merit rather than politics. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her dark eyes held the warmth that had made her crew follow her through 3 separate first contact situations. "Let's hear it," she ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice unlike anything they had ever heard filled the air. It was musical, liquid, rising and falling like ocean waves. But beneath the beauty was something else. Terror, desperation, a plea from the depths of space itself. Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenolinguist, was already at his station, fingers flying over translation matrices. At 28, he was the youngest department head on the ship, his red hair as wild as his theories about alien communication patterns. He had joined the crew fresh from the Titan University, full of ideas about bridging the gap between human and alien minds. "It's not in the standard galactic databases," he called out, his excitement cutting through the tension. "But there are patterns, mathematical progressions. They're using base 12 mathematics to establish a translation protocol." For 20 minutes, Webb worked while the bridge crew listened to the alien voice repeating its message. Finally, the translation software achieved a breakthrough. The liquid voice was replaced by synthesized English, emotionless but clear. "To the human species of the world called Earth, I am Elder Zarath of the Kythera Collective. We know you are forbidden to us. We know you are called dangerous, violent, unpredictable. We know the Council fears you above all other species. But we are dying, and you are our only hope." The bridge fell silent. Chen felt her chest tighten as the message continued. "The Syndicate harvester fleets have come to our world. They take our oceans, kill our people, destroy everything we have built across 3 million years of peace. The Council will not help us. The great powers of the galaxy flee before these raiders like minnows before sharks. But we have heard stories of your people, how you fight when others cannot, how you refuse to abandon those in need, how you survive what should kill you." The message paused, and in that silence, Chen could hear something that transcended species barriers. The sound of a mother begging for her children's lives. "We do not ask you to save us because we deserve it. We ask because you are the only ones who might try. Our coordinates are attached to this transmission. If you come, we will face whatever judgment your presence brings. If you do not, then let this message stand as testimony that the Kythera died as they lived, in hope." The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. Then Chen turned to her navigation officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "How far?" she asked simply. Jackson was already working the calculations. 17 days at maximum burn, Captain. Just inside our operational range if we skim the heliopause for gravitational assist. "Captain," Torres interrupted, his voice urgent. "We're getting another transmission. This one's from Admiral Morrison at Fleet Command." Chen had expected this. News traveled fast in the age of quantum communication, and Earth's leadership would have intercepted the same signal. "Put him through." Admiral Morrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his gray beard neatly trimmed, his uniform bearing the decorations of 40 years in service. Behind him, Chen could see the familiar chaos of Fleet Command's primary operations center. "Captain Chen," Morrison began without preamble, "I trust you received the alien transmission." "Yes, sir." "Then you'll also understand why I'm ordering you to maintain your current patrol route. This situation is delicate, Sarah. The Council has made it clear that any human intervention in non-Council space would be considered an act of aggression." Chen felt her jaw tighten. "Admiral, we're talking about genocide. We're talking about politics," Morrison replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "The Council barely tolerates our existence as it is. They've kept us penned in the Sol system for 50 years, ever since first contact. One wrong move, and they'll declare us a threat to galactic peace. And if we do nothing," Chen asked, "if we let an entire species die because we're afraid of political consequences?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, and Chen saw something in his eyes that she recognized. The same thing she felt burning in her own chest. The same thing that had driven humanity to the stars despite a galaxy that feared them. "I didn't say do nothing, Captain," Morrison said finally. "I said maintain your patrol route. If your ship happens to suffer a navigation error that takes you outside our assigned space, well, deep space is a dangerous place. Communications can be unreliable. It might be days before we could correct such an error." Chen smiled for the first time since the transmission began. "Understood, Admiral. We'll be sure to double-check our navigation systems. See that you do. And Sarah," Morrison's expression grew serious, "if you're going to do this, you're not going alone. The Beijing and the Prometheus are already moving to intercept your position. Unofficial, of course. The connection ended, and Chen turned to address her crew. She could see it in their faces, the same determination that had carried humanity from caves to stars, the same refusal to abandon others that had defined their species through every trial. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the bridge, "we have a choice to make. We can follow orders and stay safe in our corner of space while an innocent species dies, or we can remember what it means to be human." She paused, looking each of them in the eye. "The Kythera called us monsters. The Council fears us as predators. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But if that's true, then it's time the real monsters learned what happens when they threaten our neighbors." Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the ship's senior enlisted officer, was the first to speak. Her voice carried the authority of 20 years in space. "Captain, speaking for the crew, we didn't join the fleet to hide in safe harbors. We joined to explore, to protect, to represent the best of humanity to the stars." Around the bridge, heads nodded in agreement. Lieutenant Torres spoke up from his station. 17 days to get there, ma'am. But what happens when we arrive? 3 ships against a syndicate harvester fleet. Dr. Webb looked up from his console, his green eyes bright with thought. "Captain, I've been analyzing the Kythera message. They mentioned that the Council species flee from the syndicate like, how did they put it? Like minnows before sharks. Your point, Doctor? My point is that the galaxy thinks in terms of prey and predator. But humans, we think in terms of pack hunters. Lions don't flee from hyenas, even when outnumbered. They adapt. They use tactics. They turn the hunt around." Chen nodded slowly. "What do we know about the syndicate?" Webb pulled up what information they had. "Not much. They're raiders, harvesters. They strip worlds of resources and move on. But they operate in fleets, suggesting they rely on overwhelming force rather than individual ship superiority. Classic swarm tactics," noted Commander Jackson. "Hit hard, hit fast, overwhelm defenses through numbers." "Which works great," said Rodriguez with a predatory smile, "until you run into someone who fights back instead of running." Chen made her decision. "Set course for Kythera Prime. Maximum burn. And send a message to our Kythera friends. Tell them the cavalry is coming." As the Defiance changed course and accelerated toward the galactic edge, none of them could have predicted what they would find there, or how their arrival would mark the beginning of humanity's true introduction to the galaxy, not as the monsters the Council feared, but as something far more dangerous to those who preyed on the innocent. They were about to become humanity's first ambassadors to a galaxy that had tried very hard to keep them locked away. And the Syndicate was about to learn why that had been a very good idea. Deathworlders unleashed. 17 days later, the UES Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kythera system, and Captain Sarah Chen immediately understood why the Council species had fled. The Harvester fleet was massive. 47 ships of varying sizes, from scout vessels to continent-sized processing platforms, hung in orbit around the blue-green marble that was Kythera Prime. Energy beams lanced down from the larger vessels, turning entire oceans into vapor that was then collected by atmospheric processors. What had once been a world of endless seas was now pockmarked with dry basins, where life had flourished for millions of years. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Torres from his sensor station. "Captain, they've already extracted approximately 30% of the planet's surface water." Dr. Webb was analyzing the energy signatures. "Those beam weapons, they're not military grade. They're industrial. Designed for maximum efficiency and resource extraction, not ship-to-ship combat." "But 47 ships," noted Commander Jackson grimly. "Even if they're not warships, that's a lot of firepower." Chen studied the tactical display. The Beijing and Prometheus had arrived 6 hours earlier and were holding position behind a small moon, their stealth systems masking their presence. 3 human ships against 47 alien vessels. By any reasonable calculation, it was suicide. But humans had never been reasonable. Communications, patch me through to the Beijing and Prometheus, and see if you can raise our Kythera friends. The view screen split into 3 sections. Captain Liu of the Beijing, a stern woman in her 50s with graying temples, nodded curtly. Captain Rodriguez of the Prometheus, younger but with the scars of the Proxima incident across his left cheek, gave a slight smile that held no warmth. Status report, Chen requested. We've been monitoring syndicate communications, Liu reported. They're speaking a variant of trade standard, easy enough to translate. From what we can gather, they're ahead of schedule. They plan to finish resource extraction within 2 rotations. About 36 hours, Rodriguez added. After that, the planet will be uninhabitable. Total ecosystem collapse. A 4th section appeared on the screen, and Chen found herself looking at something that took her breath away. Elder Zerath floated in what appeared to be an underwater chamber, her translucent form glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her words. Even through the translation matrix, her voice carried an otherworldly beauty. Captain Chen, the Kythera elder said, her patterned speech somehow conveying both gratitude and resignation. You came. I had hoped, but not dared to believe. We're here, Chen replied simply. But I have to be honest with you, Elder. We're outnumbered 16 to 1. I can't promise we can save your world. Zerath's patterns shifted to what Webb quietly identified as the Kythera equivalent of a smile. Captain, for 3 million years, my people have lived without violence. We do not understand war, strategy, or combat, but we understand sacrifice. If you fail, at least we will die knowing that someone tried. We're not going to fail, Chen said with a conviction she didn't entirely feel. But we're going to need your help. What can you tell us about the Syndicate? They are raiders, as your Dr. Webb surmised. But more than that, they are bullies. They prey on the weak, the peaceful, those who cannot or will not fight back. In 3 centuries of operation, they have never faced serious resistance. Captain Liu leaned forward. Elder, are their ships shielded? Yes, but not heavily. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming numbers rather than defensive technology. Rodriguez was studying his tactical readouts. If they're industrial vessels, their hulls might not be reinforced for combat, but we still have the numbers problem. Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she turned to Dr. Webb. Doctor, you mentioned earlier that humans think like pack hunters. What does that mean in practical terms? Webb's eyes lit up with understanding. Pack hunters don't try to overpower their prey through direct confrontation. They use strategy, coordination, and environmental advantages. They separate the herd, create confusion, force their target to make mistakes. Exactly. Chen turned back to the screen. Captain Liu, Captain Rodriguez, I have an idea, but it's going to require perfect timing and a lot of luck. What do you have in mind? Liu asked. Chen pulled up a holographic display of the Kythera system. The Syndicate has arranged their fleet in a standard harvesting formation, processing ships in low orbit, harvesters above them, and command vessels at the edge of the formation. It's efficient for resource extraction, but it's also predictable. She highlighted several points on the display. Dr. Webb, how long would it take to modify our shield generators to emit a specific electromagnetic frequency? Webb thought for a moment. Depends on the frequency. Why? Because humans evolved on a world where pack hunting meant using every advantage available, including sound. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. The Kythera communicate through bioluminescence and harmonic frequencies. What if we could disrupt those same frequencies across the Syndicate fleet? Rodriguez caught on first. Create communication chaos. If they can't coordinate, their numbers advantage becomes a liability. Better than that, Webb added excitedly. If I can analyze Kythera communication patterns and reverse engineer them, we might be able to create interference that affects their neural pathways directly. Not harmful to us, but potentially disorienting to species that evolved in different environmental conditions. Elder Zaroth's patterns flickered with what might have been approval. The deep currents carry many frequencies, Captain. Some that soothe, others that disturb. If your people can learn to sing the songs of chaos, we can teach a harvester fleet what it means to face predators instead of prey, Chen finished. The next few hours were a frenzy of preparation. Webb worked with the engineering teams to modify the shield generators, turning them into massive acoustic transmitters. The weapons crews prepared for combat against superior numbers, while the navigation teams plotted attack vectors that would maximize confusion among the enemy fleet. Captain Liu's Beijing would strike first, using the modified shields to create electromagnetic chaos in the enemy formation. The Prometheus would follow seconds later, targeting the command vessels while their crews were still trying to figure out what was happening. The Defiance would hit the processing ships, trying to disrupt the harvesting operation and force the fleet to divide its attention. It was a desperate plan, relying more on surprise and audacity than firepower. In other words, it was perfectly human. Syndicate fleet has begun the final phase of atmospheric extraction, Torres reported as they moved into position. Estimate 6 hours until total ecosystem collapse. Then we don't have 6 hours, Chen replied. All ships, execute on my mark. The Beijing struck first, appearing from behind the system's outermost moon like a ghost materializing from nothing. Her modified shields generated a wave of electromagnetic interference that washed over the Syndicate formation like a storm front. Instantly, communications chatter erupted across the Harvester fleet as ship after ship reported system malfunctions and communication failures. The Prometheus followed 3 seconds later, her weapons lancing out at the command vessels with deadly precision. 2 of the smaller command ships were destroyed immediately, their crews never knowing what hit them. The larger command vessel managed to raise shields, but its return fire was wild and uncoordinated. Then the Defiance was among them, Chen taking her ship directly into the heart of the formation. It was a maneuver that should have been suicide. 1 human ship surrounded by dozens of alien vessels. But the Syndicate had never faced an opponent that refused to behave like prey. Multiple targets, called the weapons officer, targeting the nearest processing platform. Fire, Chen ordered. The Defiance's weapons tore into the massive platform, her concentrated fire punching through industrial-grade hulls, never designed to withstand military assault. Secondary explosions rippled across the platform as processing equipment overloaded and detonated. But now the Syndicate was recovering from their initial shock. Return fire began lancing toward the human ships as the alien fleet tried to regroup. Chen watched as energy beams converged on her position from 6 different directions. Evasive maneuvers, she called, and the Defiance danced between the beams like a fighter instead of a cruiser. The ship's artificial gravity systems screamed in protest as Chen threw them into a spiraling dive that carried them beneath the formation. Captain, Torres called out, excitement clear in his voice. The acoustic interference is working better than expected. Half their fleet is reporting navigation errors. They're actually firing on each other. Chen looked at the tactical display and smiled. The Syndicate formation was collapsing into chaos as ship after ship lost communication with its neighbors. What had been a coordinated harvesting operation was rapidly becoming a confused mob of vessels bumping into each other and shooting at shadows. All ships, press the attack, she ordered. Don't give them time to adapt. For the next hour, the 3 human ships tore through the Syndicate fleet like wolves among sheep. They used every advantage their evolution had given them. Speed, cunning, the ability to adapt and improvise in the middle of chaos. When direct assault failed, they used ambush tactics. When ambush failed, they used the enemy's confusion against them. The turning point came when Captain Rodriguez managed to capture one of the smaller command vessels intact. Within minutes, Webb had hacked their computer systems and discovered something that changed everything. Captain, he called, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You need to see this. The Syndicate isn't just harvesting resources. They're harvesting species. The Kythera aren't the first. There are records here of 67 other worlds, 67 civilizations completely destroyed. Chen felt something cold settle in her chest. Show me. The main screen filled with images that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Worlds stripped bare, their populations extinct, their cultures erased as if they had never existed. The Syndicate wasn't just raiding for resources, they were committing genocide on an industrial scale. Elder Zarath, Chen called to the Kythera leader. How many of your people are left? The patterns on Zarath's form flickered with sorrow. Perhaps 2 million. The deep cities still survive, but not for long. 2 million. From what had once been billions, and the Syndicate was barely halfway done with their harvesting. All ships, Chen ordered, her voice carrying a tone that made her crew sit up straighter. New mission parameters. We're not just stopping this harvesting operation, we're ending the Syndicate permanently. The final phase of the battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The 3 human ships didn't just fight, they hunted. They used the captured command vessel to send false orders throughout the Syndicate fleet, turning the aliens' own coordination against them. They targeted processing ships with surgical precision, causing cascade failures that took out multiple vessels at once. But most importantly, they fought with a fury that the galaxy's peaceful species couldn't understand. This wasn't just about tactics or strategy. This was about justice for 67 dead civilizations and determination that there would be no 68th. When Admiral Vextai, the Syndicate fleet commander, finally managed to restore communications to his flagship, he found himself facing something his species had no experience with. An enemy that got stronger when pushed into a corner. Unknown vessels, he transmitted on all frequencies. You are interfering with a legitimate salvage operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Chen's response was broadcast not just to the Syndicate fleet, but to every listening post within 50 light years. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance. You are engaged in acts of genocide against peaceful species. Your operations end here. Impossible, Vextai replied, his translator giving his voice a metallic rasp. 3 ships cannot defeat 47. You are prey attempting to challenge predators. You're right about one thing, Chen said, and now her voice carried the weight of 3 million years of human evolution. We are predators. But you made one critical mistake. You assumed you were the apex predator in this system. The final assault began with Captain Lu's Beijing ramming directly through the center of the Syndicate formation, her modified shields tearing apart any vessel that came too close. The Prometheus followed, her weapons targeting the fleet's fuel and ammunition stores, creating a chain reaction of explosions that lit up the darkness of space. And the Defiance, Chen's beloved ship, danced through the chaos like humanity's answer to the question of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The answer, it turned out, was that the immovable object learns to move very quickly indeed. When the battle ended, 36 Syndicate vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 11 limped away into deep space, their crews carrying tales of the day they encountered true predators for the first time in their species' history. But for Chen and her crew, the victory felt hollow. They had saved the Kythera, but they had also learned the terrible truth about the galaxy they lived in. How many other civilizations were out there, facing extinction while the Council debated, and the great powers looked the other way? Captain, Dr. Webb said quietly as they watched the surviving Syndicate ships disappear into hyperspace. What happens now? Chen looked at the tactical display, then at the image of Elder Zarath, whose bioluminescent patterns now pulsed with something that might have been hope. Now, she said, we go home, and we tell Earth what we learned here. That the galaxy isn't divided into predators and prey. It's divided into those who protect the innocent and those who prey on them. She paused, looking out at the stars that suddenly seemed less distant and more dangerous. And it's time the predators learned that humanity has chosen which side we're on. 3 weeks later, The Galactic Council received a message from Earth that would change the course of galactic history. It was simple, direct, and delivered in 17 different languages. The human species hereby announces its intention to provide protection to any peaceful civilization threatened by aggressive forces. We offer our friendship to those who seek peace, our aid to those who need help, and our promise to those who would harm the innocent. We are watching. The message was signed by every human government, every military commander, and every civilian who had voted in the emergency referendum that followed the Defiance's return. The galaxy had spent 50 years trying to contain humanity, fearful of what a species born on a death world might do when unleashed among the stars. They had been right to be afraid, but they had been afraid of the wrong thing. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were born killers. They were dangerous because they refused to let others be victims. And across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear of raiders and conquerors began to whisper a new word in 1,000 different languages. A word that meant hope, protection, and the promise that somewhere among the stars, someone was willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. They called them the Guardians. But the humans just called it being human.